The next area, so emotional development. Does the child appear like really anxious or stressed or really timid and quiet throughout the day? How does the child cope with transitions or sudden changes in routine? The teacher being away, sport being cancelled because it's raining, their partner who they thought they were going to be paired with being sick from school, their best friend not being there, those sorts of things. Is the child able to bounce back after being reprimanded, or does it ruin their day completely? And I don't even mean them, focusing a reprimand at them, but sometimes teachers tell off the whole class for being too loud, and everyone seems to bounce back, but some kids internalize that and they take it really, really personally. How does the child cope with making mistakes? Do they shut down and really struggle with that? All those things will give us a bit of an indication of anxiety levels and resilience levels and that sort of thing, and I think that's very important as well.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to have Emily Hanlon joining us again for our second podcast interview. Her last podcast, if you haven't listened to it, it's had thousands of listens. She's always full of inspiration and tips. If you don't follow Emily on Instagram, I highly recommend you add her to your faves because I love it. She always has fabulous ideas for kids, and I love all the little what would you call them? Metaphors and ideas you use. Yeah, so good, Emily. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, have another little chat.
So Emily, I reached out to you because I'm getting so many emails from early childhood educators who didn't see the kids consistently during lockdown, and there's sort of a hangover of getting assessments and feeling comfortable having conversations. But I'm also getting children who are starting school who in the past would have turned up with a diagnosis and haven't. And a lot of teachers and educators not sure how to talk to families, what to look for, what to say. And I'm always about, saving teachers time. Sure, they could get on Google, but I prefer we go to a psychologist like you that has a wealth of experience, both personal, lived, and in your professional, to share with us what to do. So I thought we'd just do a deep dive into how to talk to parents, what to look for, and why to look for it. So
that sounds great.
Are you finding the same, though, bit of a lag with diagnostic?
Definitely. And I think it comes down to number one, kids weren't in school essentially for 2 years. So that's 2 years of people not observing them outside of the family really, but also because of lockdowns and everything, and we ceased a lot of in-person services, the backlog of assessments, especially in the public system, is just insane. Sometimes for an autism assessment, I'm hearing 18 months, and 18 months when we're talking about, early therapeutic options is too late. It's too long to wait when you're wanting to access early intervention.
Absolutely. And so anyone who is listening, what I'd say to you, there is an urgency around starting those conversations, because even if the parents put their name down and over the 18 months choose not to go ahead with the assessment, I would be coming a little bit from there. Just get your name down. We can keep watching in the next 18 months.
And there's no cost. 99% of the clinics I'm aware of have no cost to be on a wait list. So you're not losing anything in being on that wait list. And if you don't need the appointment, you cancel it.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that you're going to talk about today, they can still be gathering these things over the 18 months. It's not like the families are going next week. And I just want to really emphasize that for people listening, that it's not like parents are going to ring up and get assessment tomorrow.
No, that's it.
And, unfortunately, the way the economy is, a lot of our families can't afford diagnosis. 100%. So it also gives them a bit of time to save. I mean, I don't know. What is the average cost of diagnosis?
Honestly, it can vary anywhere between $1,500 and $4,000. There's a lot of variance. Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing too. Yeah. So that's really helpful to know. And again, that gives parents a bit of time to get their head around that cost, because that can be a barrier.
A big barrier, yeah.
Yeah, totally. That sounds like a lot of money if you're not sure.
Especially in these times with inflation and the cost of living going up. It's not something that a lot of families have lying around. So
No. So thank you. That's very, very helpful. Okay. So how do I talk to families? I mean, I think it's a really hard one. So help us out.
So I've got a lot of tips here based on like my experience, both as like a sibling of an autistic individual and what we went through as a family through the school system, but also from when I've gone to meetings with parents and I've seen ways that teachers speak to parents that just are awful and then ways that really resonate with the parents. So I've kind of gathered some tips on, based on all that experience. I think it's really important to remember that as nerve-wracking as these conversations can be, it's of course not the teacher's role to offer like a diagnosis or a suggestion of what the diagnosis may be. It's just to bring things to the parents' attention that they may not be aware of, because the home and school environment are totally different in regards to what they demand from a child. So some of the tips that I have when you start these meetings are, and they sound simple. I know they sound simple, but I think they're really important. So the first one is just to like be mindful of the tone that you're using with parents. Tone is everything. Those first few sentences and like gestures that you make are so important in determining the success of a meeting and whether or not this is going to be a collaborative meeting or parents feel like they're just going to be yelled at or talked down to and that sort of thing. Start with like a conversation icebreaker. Don't walk to the meeting room in total silence. There's nothing worse. That's like my PTSD from like getting in trouble at the principal's office, is when you were like walked down.
Yeah. Can I just go back a step on that? Because I think what you're saying is really important, that PTSD. So a lot of parents themselves might have had some negative experience.
Absolutely.
And particularly because many of our parents may have been undiagnosed. So we think the stats say 50%. So I'm also very mindful of where I meet. So I wouldn't be going to a principal's office.
No.
And sometimes I say to parents, look, I'm on yard duty before. Why don't you come and meet me and just have that little walk around and relax before that. I mean, to tell you the truth, when I was teaching in Adelaide's called reception, kindy prep, whatever state you're in, some of my best conversations were in supermarkets. I'm with the parents at the supermarket. Yeah. And and because it was out of both of our, the parents were more comfortable. So I think thinking about that environment, that maybe the classroom somewhere the parents more comfortable than in an office.
I totally agree, because the purpose of these meetings is to not like tell the parent everything that's going wrong or everything the child's doing wrong. And so you don't want that vibe to come off by having the meeting in like a really cold office with 50 people present and one parent, or you don't want to start off with a really negative tone. You just want to start the meeting by calming the parent, because if the parent isn't calm going into that meeting, they're going to be on the defensive, and that's just a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, I've seen children pulled out of school straight after that meeting because of how it's gone. And I think this is the fear that early childhood educators and teachers are bringing to this conversation, because they actually want the best for the child. They know it's a sensitive topic and they're not sure how to address it. So I love, let's think about where we're meeting. Let's think about the tone and making sure we have a bit of a chit chat before we start. So I would say, like, just think about, like, go, what have you been watching on Netflix? How was your weekend? Don't start on the child. Maybe just start with something, and share a little bit about yourself. Just sort of give that, and to help yourself relax too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that would be my first tip. As simple as it sounds, I think it's one of the most important. The second thing is, and this is often overlooked, but say nice things about the child. Don't jump into everything that may be going wrong for them. You kind of, even if you have some really negative feelings about what's going on with that child or their behavior at that, given point, you need to think of at least 2 or 3 positive things to say and ask them, like, how do you think they're finding school at the moment? Look, I know we've called this meeting because I have a few concerns, but I also just really want to reiterate how awesome I think they are at this, or how hard I've noticed they're trying at that. I will never ever forget this meeting I went to for a little boy that I worked with an ADHD diagnosis, and his parents were in there, and they were like, first of all, they thought they were meeting with the class teacher, and I came along to the meeting and there was 4 people, including the principal, in the meeting, and we were in an office. Big mistake. They just jumped into everything that this child was doing wrong in their eyes. And I jumped in halfway through their spiel and was like, can you just give us some, you know, put light on what he's doing really well or where his strengths lie? And the teacher was like, sorry. And I was like, what's he good at? And they were floundering. They were looking through, like they had no answer. And it was awful to see the parents sit there so defeated, so deflated. And this group of staff who are meant to be, you know, nurturing this child had not one positive thing to say. And he wasn't a naughty kid. He just struggled. Like he wasn't a bad kid. There was not even behavior. There were so many positives about this little boy. So
stop it. Stop it. You're making me want to cry. So this is my advice for any meeting, whether it's an IEP or you have to have 4 positives to 1 negative. And to build any good relationships. Like if you think of any relationships in your life, personal, work, you've got to have 4 positives to 1 negative. So just a little tip from me is that for parents and carers and professionals listening, I always get everyone to sit quietly and just do a reflection and write down 3 things that are going well.
Perfect.
And then what are our 3 biggest challenges?
Yeah.
Then I get everyone to go around and share what's going well. Because it gives everyone the reminder there are some things going well. That might be a child who we couldn't even get into school 5 days a week. This could be a child, you know, that they've actually made a friend. You know, let's start with the positives. And I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to start with the positives. But it's also why I think educators and teachers should follow some neurodiverse Facebook and Instagram.
Absolutely.
Because you hear the parent's voice of how stressful life can be living with a neurodiverse child. And I know you've got a link I'm going to share to a letter your mum wrote that every time a parent walks into the school, every time they send a message, they've had 10 thoughts about doing that and the apprehension. And so we have to be really careful if all we give is negative because, I mean, as most parents in those groups would say, they've heard all that. They don't need us to tell them. They've actually heard it from family. Like, really? They don't need to come to school to hear that.
I know. That's it. 100%. 100%. They know all this stuff.
Yeah, correct. I mean, and if they haven't heard it, then there's even more reason we need to be very careful how we go about it. So I love that. I love it. So say nice things as much as you say it's obvious.
I know.
100% say.
And it can come down to nerves as well. Like you can get so caught up in the moment, you just want to get to the point because you're so nervous about the meeting, which I fully appreciate. But I guess that's why it's important, like you said, to prepare and come prepared and have your notes and everything.
And I think that is the other thing.
Yeah.
Bring some good, if you're going to be nervous, bring some lovely work the child's done recently.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Bring in the early childhood, they have a folder. Bring the folder. So you've sort of got something to refer to if you're a bit lost in that moment. So
totally.
Boom. Love it. Yeah. Number 2, say nice things. Really agree. Okay.
And I think that like kind of feeds into the third point as well, which is like you need to obviously be nice in these meetings while also being really firm. But it's important to be collaborative. Like the one thing you don't want is it to be us versus them because you're never going to get anywhere. When you're working with a child, it takes a village for a reason. And it's really important to get the parents, you know, perspective of what they think or why the child might be doing that or whether they've experienced the same thing at home, what's been successful, what's not, because that's how you're able to come up with a plan that can be consistently applied across environments. We're not just talking about school. And I think sometimes when it comes to school as well, a lot of kids can, you know, mask and hold things in and then they have this meltdown after school. And when parents approach teachers about those sorts of things, teachers or the school can say, oh, that's not an us problem, that's a home problem because we don't see that here. And again, that just emphasizes the need to be collaborative because the behavior may be at home, but the cause of the behavior is occurring throughout the day at school. So in every aspect of child development, if everyone is on the same page, you're more likely to see more positive interactions and positive change down the track.
I also think it's less exhausting.
I agree.
You feel like you're constantly in conflict. It's exhausting. If you're on the same page, for both of us, there's more ease and grace. There's more whatever we want to call it. But in my experience, it's much nicer that you see a parent and you smile than be like, oh, and vice versa, parents about us as teachers. So I think when we work collaboratively, that gives you energy and honesty. You can say, oh, we had a bad morning. But this is where, as much as I say the child going home having a meltdown or I need to know, I need the parent to prepare the child for school in the morning, of their best learning in the morning, making sure that they're up on time, have something to eat. So this is where we help each other.
Agree.
That preparation in the morning for the school day means that my day runs smoother. Totally. And then me preparing the child for home. So if there's things that have been holding in, knowing what those might be during the day. Like one of my little boys, it was about when teachers would go find a partner. And he was always left to last. And he would hold that in, and then the meltdowns would happen when he got home. Because he was always left to last. And, just telling him first thing in the morning who his partners, or I called them appointments, because he was opposition or defiant. So there was a reason children often didn't pair with him. It could be challenging, but it helped him because the children then came to him. They knew they had an appointment with him, and he knew who their appointment was, and he'd have 3 appointments a day if we were doing, any grouping. That was his. So over the week he had 15 partners. That's inclusion to me.
That's it. 100%. I agree.
But for his mum, she could tell him in the morning, remember your appointments today are boom, boom, boom. And then it would stop all that anxiety at the end of the day.
And that's just a perfect example of like everyone being on the same page and everyone using the same strategy consistently.
100%. And then what worked, then of course we had where a child was away once.
Oh no. So
Mum and I had to have like backup appointments.
That's so funny.
I know. You think you have the best plan, but then something goes wrong. You're like, no, that child's away. What's our backup? So then we'd have who are our backup appointments today? And then this is hilarious. The thing. Strategies wear out, but sometimes you think you've got the best strategy and you have to tweak it.
100%. You're always thinking on your feet with the kids. It's so funny.
But can I tell you, I've used that with hundreds of kids since. And, it's the old thing. I learned something from one child and family, and then I can
implement it with a million. So good.
So, but you said we need to be firm. And I think this is where teachers and educators really struggle, particularly those of children in the younger years, where I know we're going to come to the red flags, but often it's hard to be firm when you don't know yourself.
And that's it. I think that's why it's so important. Like I said at the very beginning, you're not going in offering a possible diagnosis. You're going in with facts. And that's actually my next point. So if you have all your like quote unquote evidence and all your notes, you can be firm because you have that evidence in front of you. If a teacher has said that, a child hit another child, you need to know when, who else was there. You need to have talked to the other children involved. Where did it happen? Does it happen frequently? You need all this information so that when you tell the parents, you can answer all the questions that they may have about the incident. So even though you know what's going on, you can't assume that parents are just going to take your word for it. They want to, every parent wants to believe that their child is doing well and would never hit another child. But if their child is doing that, they need to know those facts. And if you're firm and you're confident in the evidence that you've gathered going in, that's going to be really helpful for helping, translate that into language that parents are going to be receptive to. And I think, again, that kind of leads to the next point. If you have all that evidence and you've, got notes and you filled out like little behavior logs or anything like that, you have tried to figure out what's happening and you can propose possible triggers to the parents, which shows like that you've thought about this and you really care about what's going on and you really want to help the child. It's not just you throwing all these negative facts on the parent. You're there going like, how can we help this child? Because this is what I've seen. Do you guys see these triggers at home too?
Yeah. And I think what you just said there is what I've found invaluable over the years, saying to the parents, I'm wondering if you've got any ideas.
Yeah.
And often that's when they go, no, I don't know what to do. And then that's actually boom. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that moment. 100%. Can I just also say, if parents say, no, they haven't seen that behaviour at home, I find a very powerful question is, do you ever take the child to a playground? Do you take them to birthday parties? What do you do outside your home? Do you go to restaurants or family gatherings? Do you ever see that behaviour there? Because sometimes when I say at home, they haven't thought beyond those places because they stopped going.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Oh, no, I don't take them there. It's too hard to do it by myself.
Yeah. So that is also an opportunity to say, well, what was it that made it hard? And often I have to say to parents, you realize my preschool is like a birthday party. You realize that my classroom is. So sometimes getting the parents to remember, because if that was something they've stopped doing, there's a reason they've been avoiding it, or even, do you ever take them to the supermarket? That's often an interesting one, and just try and think of situations where you're getting the parents onto that collaborative page.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Bringing them in. So, just really look for those opportunities. But again, coming from what I call coming from love, coming from, I want the most for you and your child.
That's it.
I want to ensure that we get on this road.
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. And the way I look at it, sometimes I think I'm advocating for that child.
Yes, that's it. That's what you're doing. And I think, and again, that leads me to my next point is, I know we've talked about collaboration and stuff, but that's just so important in like not leaving parents out. Like ask them what they think. There's nothing worse than you going into that meeting and then making assumptions about their child without really asking them if they have an opinion, because you can go in and all of a sudden you get all this information that you weren't aware of. Oh, actually, we've just moved house. Oh, actually, he just found out that we're moving away from his best friend who lives next door. Or actually, she's mentioned that she's been getting bullied in the playground. Or actually, she has not been sleeping well. We're going to go see an ENT about it. All those things, if you are asking opinions and asking and you're engaging in that collaborative approach, you're going to get so much more information. If you go into a meeting and you just talk at a parent, they're not going to offer anything because you haven't asked them a question.
Yeah. And, there's nothing wrong with those open questions. How do you think things are going? Yeah.
And that's it. Like parents, 99% of the time, know their children better than anyone.
Exactly.
So it's really important to use that as a wealth of knowledge to help you in the classroom.
Oh, I love that. That could be a quote on my Facebook. It's really important we use parents as a wealth of knowledge. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Now, the other thing I just wanted to say when we talk about parents, COVID has changed who's parenting and who are the primary carers.
Yeah.
A lot of my families, the grandparents stepped in during COVID. And actually have become that wealth of knowledge. And if we're having a meeting, you might want to consider inviting the key stakeholders who might be the grandparents who drop off a child every day.
Yep.
And I think people have forgotten that. We tend to have a parent meeting and we see the grandparent more than we do the parent. So
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Obviously, we need to change our thinking a little bit, change our notes that we sent out pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Because I know myself, my neighbours, they stepped up during COVID and they've kept that routine going. So I just wanted to alert people to be very mindful of who are the key people we need in the conversation. And it might be a grandparent. Where I live in Sydney, often English is their second language. So getting those interpreters in early.
And that's important. It's so important. Like not having things like that available, like an interpreter, is so not inclusive. Like it's so awful. And assuming that they'll figure out is discrimination.
Yeah. But also I have made this mistake, and so you can learn from mine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the parents said we don't need an interpreter. We speak English. But then the parent had an odd relationship with their parent, so they were editing the question to the grandparent, which makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
100%. And then afterwards, I realized what had happened. So now I'm like, look, I know that you could interpret for your parent, but it's really important you get to just listen.
Yeah.
And I would prefer an interpreter there for your mum, you know, because if it's a mother-in-law, like, wouldn't you edit out for your mother-in-law?
100%. Sorry, Janine. Absolutely, I would.
So we just need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might want to ask, when they've hit someone, they just like, have you noticed anything? So I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah. Don't get a sibling to interpret either. I've had that.
Yeah.
Parents go, their older sister can come. No, their older sister isn't appropriate for this.
Yeah, it's not appropriate. And it's anxiety provoking for the sibling as well, like on top of everything else.
And then they feel responsible.
Yeah, I agree.
They take on that responsibility. Okay, sorry. An important aside, but I hope people...
All good. No, I think that's a really good point. Okay, so I've got 2 more points for you. First one, the second last one is, There's nothing worse than a problem without a solution. Now, I don't mean you need to go in and go, this is how we're fixing it, but have a next step readily available to the parents. And this is where you may open the door to suggesting that they do need a bit of an assessment from a psychologist or an OT or whatnot. So like if you're recommending that a child would benefit from an assessment or something, of some sort, this is where you let them know. But, and I cannot stress this enough, and I know there are so many teachers that don't do this, and I love those teachers, but I have gone, I reckon actually 8 times out of 10 when I go to meetings, teachers suggest medication, and that's neither appropriate nor professional. It's not even professional for myself as a clinical psychologist to do that. And if that's the end goal of the meeting, you've lost the parent and you've lost all the good work and hard work that you've put into that meeting. That's not your job. That is not my job. That is the job of the pediatrician.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think that's important.
I think that's really, really important. And hate to say it, medication alone is not the solution.
Absolutely not. No.
And so anyone who's listening who thinks, oh, we'll just get medication, that's going to fix it. It's not. It is so much more complex than that. And even the medications that are available take a long time to get right. So I wouldn't be putting that on the table. But
absolutely. I'm working with this little boy at the moment. He's the most gorgeous boy. He has a diagnosis of ADHD, but and it's a private school, so I think they feel like they have more leeway. But every time that they forced him to go see a pediatrician, I mean, I think it's a good thing that he has a regular ped, but they're like, you need to show us what the plan is for medication, otherwise we're asking him to leave. And I'm like, that is just so illegal and so inappropriate and so and the family is very like torn because their other 2 children go there, and they don't want him to, and it's just an awful situation. The school's just really unhelpful. So please, that's just, if you take anything away from today, that's not anyone's job but the doctor's.
I love that. And I think that's really, really important. But it also reminds us we don't have to do a job that's not our job.
That's it.
Teachers are asked to do so much.
Yeah.
It's not our job to diagnose.
Yeah.
It's not our job to recommend medication.
Yeah.
It's our job to collaborate and advocate for the child.
Exactly.
And if you get sent a form to fill in for helping the pediatrician decide what medication, be on that, put as much information as you can on there.
Yeah.
And I do highly recommend once a child is on medication, you keep recording that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So often, I mean, I've had it where teachers go, oh, no, there hasn't been any change. But if they look back, there's been massive change, but it's been so gradual that they get it. Anyway, that's another whole conversation.
Totally get that, yeah.
Can I just say, one of the problems I have when people, with providing solutions, the first thing parents say to me is, who should I go to? So because obviously we have listeners all over the world, how do we know who to send parents to? Because that makes sense. That's a question.
Yeah, totally. So there's a couple of ways you can go about that. Now, you can Google a child psychologist in your area and look at reviews online, or you can call your GP and see who their referral source is. That's a really good way to see who may be local in your area. The same with the pediatrician. You don't necessarily have to book an appointment. You may just call the pediatrician and say, who do you recommend in the area? And they often have a list of people that they refer to. I know on my, I get this question a lot, especially post-COVID, because everywhere seems to have such huge wait lists. So on my Instagram page, I have a highlight reel of it's Australia-wide, people who don't currently have a wait list.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
You're amazing, Emily. Honestly, that's what I love about you. You're always providing shortcuts and solutions. That's why I'm saying follow Emily. She has so many good ideas. I love all my little pop-up in my Instagram and seeing, oh, what's she recommending today?
So there's stuff like that, because you want to be able to go in and as a teacher, you don't want to go like, I really recommend you see a psychologist. And then when they say, who are you, like, oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So maybe I also go like, because, I'm sure that when kids come to me and they see an OT, and I have really appreciated the collaborative work I've done with an OT, for example, I keep their name so that when someone asks me for a recommendation for the OT, that's where I go. And I'm sure like maybe teachers could do the same thing if they've had a really positive interaction with the psychologist of another student. Maybe they could keep a little bit of a list and keep that handy for when these situations arise.
100%. That's what I do. I actually find the parents the best source. But I always say to parents, look, you have to understand it. Finding a psychologist, pediatrician is a little bit like finding your own GP.
Yeah.
You can have a friend recommend them who love them.
Yeah.
And then another person doesn't. So, I know the waiting list is long, but be open-minded once you've had the assessment that you might need to find someone that's a good fit for you and your child. And that's fine. You know, like be kind to yourself, that it is like finding we've all had professionals that friends love that we don't. And I sometimes find that also adds the collaborative effect where I'm going, look, I've heard this from other parents, or I've met psychologists, found them really helpful, but it can take a while to find the right fit for your family. Yeah. Totally. And again, I think all of that sounds collaborative.
Yeah.
I think that comes
100%.
from, because you don't want them to go, I didn't like that doctor, I don't want to tell the teacher.
Yeah.
Door open. I've left the door open.
Yeah,
so,
that's 100%. That's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And I guess that's like my last point is have a mail trail, because you want to have that meeting done and dusted, but you want to have the plan in writing. You want to be able to email that to everyone involved so that there's like a bit of a trail of information. You know where you left off, you know what everyone's job is before the next meeting, and schedule the next meeting via email so that everyone can have done their little jobs by the time you follow up. You may have a meeting in 3 weeks and all that's been done is that those appointments have been made, but that's good. That's a really good starting point. So I think that's really, really important as well.
That's massive. Now, this is where I need to add in, because as a teacher, this has happened to me many times, where the parent goes, no, we don't want to go for an assessment. Yeah. Right. And I think it's very important you have that documented, because if the parents are in a very, what I'd call strong grief cycle of denial, we need that documented. Absolutely. And I tend to, in that email trail, have, at this stage, the parents have chosen not to seek pediatrician psychologists. We're going to touch base in another 3-4 weeks and rediscuss that. But I think we need to acknowledge they've chosen not to.
Yeah. For your own, you don't want it to go like a year down the track and then for the parents to be like, no one told us anything, when you've actually done all the hard work that you needed to do, and you want that in writing.
That's 100% why I was going to say that, Emily. You stole my words. You stole that 100%. But also, 6 months later, they might be with another teacher. Yes. They need to know that mail trail.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'd be printing out that email, putting it in the file so it doesn't get lost. It's because I have seen it, having been around for far too long, where parents go, no one told me. And when I talk to the kindy teacher, they go, I did. Yeah, I had 3 meetings. Yeah. That
there's no evidence of it. Yeah.
So 100%. You're 100% right. We don't want to go there. Okay. So let's tell us, what am I looking for? What are the red flags? This is always a hard conversation.
Yeah. So I think if you're like a teacher or early educator trying to look at red flags and how to approach parents about this, try and break it up into 3 main kind of areas that you're looking for. So social development, emotional development, and academic achievement, based on like roughly what age the child is. So under social development, you want to look like, are they playing well with others? Do they approach other children? Are they okay when other children approach them? Do they struggle with tasks that other children appear to manage quite easily, like following 2 or 3 step instructions, that sort of thing? Are they very easily distractible to the degree that doesn't seem age appropriate, like a lot more than the other kids in their class? Because, you know, especially with younger kids, they're all distractible, but just to what extent, like how much is it impacting the rest of the class? Have complaints been made, you know, about the child by a lot of other children or other teachers at, you know, during lunchtime? All those sorts of things you want to just keep a bit of an eye on, and have some notes on. So again, when you go, oh, we think your child's struggling socially, and the parent goes, what do you mean? You have clear examples under that.
Love it. Love it.
The next area, so emotional development. Does the child appear like really anxious or stressed or really timid and quiet throughout the day? How does the child cope with transitions or sudden changes in routine? The teacher being away, sport being cancelled because it's raining, their partner who they thought they were going to be paired with being sick from school, their best friend not being there, those sorts of things. Is the child able to bounce back after being reprimanded, or does it ruin their day completely? And I don't even mean them, you know, focusing and reprimand at them. But, sometimes teachers, tell off the whole class for being too loud, and everyone seems to bounce back. But some kids internalize that and they take it really, really personally. How does the child cope with making mistakes? Do they shut down and really struggle with that? All those things will give us a bit of an indication of anxiety levels and resilience levels and that sort of thing. And I think that's very important as well. I think when we look at emotional development, we think like big emotional meltdowns, and that's not that for me is a different issue in itself, because we need to figure out what's underlying that, and that will be obvious if they're having meltdowns. You can definitely jot that down. But in regards to like more minute or more subtle red flags, this is what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. This is so good. I love that the being reprimanded even in class, because that is one that 100%. I think it's really important, and it'd be interesting and a really good question to ask the parent.
That's it. And like, how do they manage that? Like, if they seem okay at school, how do they manage that at home? Like, that's a really good question.
100%. Love it.
And then finally, like academic achievement, is there a specific area that the child really appears to be struggling? Like, are they totally fine but really struggle with maths, or could they benefit from additional supports? Or a really good indicator that I've noticed is, does the child take up more time from the teacher's aide than the child that the teacher's aide is actually for? And I often see that happen, and that's a really good indicator. For younger kids, you just want to be looking for little things as well, like, do they get really tired after they run for a little bit of, and other kids seem to be okay with that amount of running? Is that an indication of gross motor difficulties? How do they go with their pencil, with colouring in and cutting? Do they get really tired after that? That could be an indication of fine motor difficulties. So there's all these little things that you can be looking out for.
Yeah, actually, I just want to jump back, because what you said about the teacher aides, I have a huge community of teacher aides who listen to this podcast. So I just want to acknowledge our beautiful angels, because they are often the ones who are 100% saying, I'm in a classroom for so-and-so, but I spend more time with so-and-so. So angels, you can actually start to make a list for the teacher and put your hand up to go to that meeting.
100%. You're the eyes at the back of the teacher's head. Like, you see things that the teacher doesn't.
Yes. And often my aides aren't invited to that meeting. And I think we have to collaborate with our aides as well.
For sure. Absolutely.
And also, if they are in those meetings, often it says to parents, we're going to get extra support if you get a diagnosis. You can actually have more of this sort of time. And that is a motivator for some parents.
I totally agree.
So we're starting that conversation. So good. So these are invaluable, Emily, and I'll make sure I put like some dot points in the notes for everybody, because I think, like all of us, these are things we can go back to. I recommend people print it out so they're as an ongoing reference.
For sure.
But is there actually a checklist or anything teachers can use? Or
so I thought about this one when I was preparing for today. There are some checklists out there. I personally wouldn't recommend them, because scientifically they tell us nothing. They're kind of just like information gathering. And I really feel like you as a teacher can do that on their own accord and individualize the notes they're taking based on the child. So for me, I would just be really strongly recommending that teachers like maybe drop down those headings, social, emotional, and academic, and writing down behaviors or areas of concern under those headings, giving clear examples. If other teachers are reporting things, get notes from them that are date and time stamped, all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily be filling out a questionnaire, because also if and when a child does get an assessment, the psychologist is going to give you questionnaires to fill out. So there's no point like filling out all these questionnaires you don't need to fill out.
I love it. We're all about not filling in paperwork we don't need to fill in. So thank you, Emily.
That's right. Every time I send a form to a teacher, I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Anyone who's cooking dinner during this time will be raising their glass and having a sip of wine going, thank you, Emily. I don't want to fill in that paperwork till I need to. So at the end of the day, why do we need to get a diagnosis? What is the point?
I think it's a really good question, because I think a lot of the time we get stuck on like, we don't need labels, we don't need this, we don't need that. But a diagnosis can help in so many ways. First of all, access to supports, access to funding, invaluable, not only in school, but also outside of school, especially with the NDIS. If we're talking about children under 7, there's early intervention funding. All of that sort of stuff is invaluable to children and to parents. Secondly, if you don't know exactly what's going on for a child, how can you tailor the approach to them? If we assume a child has ADHD, but they're actually autistic, our approaches should theoretically be very, very different. So, in that regard, I think it's very important. And finally, it's really important, I think, for everyone involved in the care of that child to be able to understand the child better, to understand exactly what's going on for them, but also for that child when the parents choose it to be appropriate, to better understand themselves.
Yeah, so true. So true. So true, Emily. I think they're all such good points. And I have found over the years when I talk to parents, I always say, and I'm having this first conversation, I would be saying, say, Emily, you were the child. I really want Emily to get the most out of my classroom. And I feel like I'm missing some things I should be doing to ensure Emily gets the most out of learning. Yeah. And when I put it like that, and I go, look, I'm not qualified to work out what those things are. I've tried a lot of things I've learned. I would love a psychologist or pediatrician to guide me. Yeah. Sometimes I find that a better conversations because the parents think I'm the problem.
Yeah. They're like the poor Sue, she needs some help.
Poor Sue, she needs help. We need to get her help.
Yeah.
But actually, that is the truth.
Yeah, I agree.
The truth is I've got 30 kids and I cannot work out what's going on with Emily. I've done everything I'd normally do. I think that diagnosis is going to be the missing clue because we give some aid time, some OT, some speech, some emotional regulation, like all this stuff can wrap around that child. Yeah. But then what you just said next is the child understanding themselves. So if it's social, well, why, I love the I am Aspie girl explaining sometimes their friends don't want to play with them.
100%. Yeah.
So good. So
I just think it's really important for general understanding of an individual.
All of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So that is amazing. Emily, you have shared so much with us today. And I can't encourage people enough to go and look at your website, your resources and courses. Can you just tell us a little bit, because your courses absolutely complement things people have done with me, and also for parents, a wealth of information there. And a lot of my parents are in regional Australia who don't have access to a psychologist. So your website is a way for people who need support and help to do stuff online at their own time and don't have to drive 2 hours into town to see someone. So can you just give us a little, what are the things they could learn from you beyond today?
Yeah, for sure. So I've got online courses on my website, and I've also got digital and physical resources, but there's 4 in particular that I think that would be really beneficial for your audience. So if you are any form of allied health professional, I do have an NDIS letter writing workshop that takes 45 minutes to complete and comes with a couple of templates that really helps hone in on the language that NDIS planners are looking for when parents are applying for funding. So I think that could be a really invaluable resource there. I've also got understanding emotions workshops online. There's a clinician one and a parent one. So I've tailored the information differently depending on who the audience is. And that's a really good one if you are looking, as a parent, looking for ways to better understand emotions in children and understand what underlies those feelings. So that's awesome. But the one that I think is going to be most beneficial for most of the audience here, because it's a perfect resource for anyone that works with children or has a child, is the IEP bundle. So this is a resource that I made because I wish I had it when I was a younger psychologist. And it has all this information on individual education plans. I know they call different things in different areas of Australia, but it has editable templates for everything, a letter for inviting people, a template for making notes, a template for creating a summary appropriate for the child, a template for creating the actual IEP, a template for follow-up notes, a template for everything. And I really think that I know a lot of schools have their own, but I know a lot of schools don't. And I'm so sick of seeing generic IEPs. So I just created this with that in mind, that I want children to be able to get the most out of their individual education plans, because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, 100%. And I was so excited when I saw that came out, because I've been meaning to write something like that myself for years and, on the to-do list.
Yeah.
And so I'm thrilled because I don't need to do it anymore. Emily, you've done it. I can tick it off my list, because when I looked at it, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Again, I mean, I talk to teachers who are in 1 or 2 teacher schools out of Dubbo or wherever. They haven't got time and they often don't have a template. And so why not use what you've created, having worked with lots of families and schools and know what is required.
That's it.
And dare I say, parents, maybe you need it because sometimes you need to be that resource at that IEP.
100%.
Yeah,
I've had lots of parents purchase it for the purpose of taking it to a meeting with the school.
100%. And I would be as a parent doing that because it gives everyone a starting point. And often, unfortunately, parents, I know it shouldn't be your job, but it does end up being your job to be the collator of the history.
Yeah, that's it.
It's easier if we've got an IEP that's used a similar format to compare over the years. That's what I've found.
Yeah, I agree.
It's better to have a similar looking form that we can collect over the years. Well, thank you, Emily, for sharing your invaluable time with us. I will link to everything in the show notes or the podcast notes. I am going away feeling much better about what I've said in the past and what we do double check on in ourselves.
For sure, you've got to. So, everyone does.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to having you on the podcast again because I know you've always got so much to share with us. So
thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Atwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.